DeepSeek's $6 million masterstroke. How one quiet Chinese startup vaporized $593 billion and shattered Silicon Valley's AI monopoly. January 27, 2025 will be remembered as the day a single line of code rattled Wall Street. Before lunch, Nvidia, long hailed as the pick-and-shovel king of artificial intelligence, shed an eye-watering $593 billion in market value, the largest one-day wipeout any public company has ever recorded. The trigger wasn't a botched earnings call or a regulatory probe. It was the stealth release of DeepSeek R1, a Chinese-built language model that appeared to match and, in some tasks, beat the best that OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google could offer. Yet it claimed to cost just $6 million to train. Investors panicked, analysts gasped, and the AI gold rush suddenly looked more like a bubble about to pop. But DeepSeek's story didn't begin with the crash. It began 2 years earlier in a nondescript Shanghai office where an ex-quant hedge fund manager decided to rewrite the rules of modern computing. DeepSeek slipped into the public's hands the way legends do, quietly. When the R1 chatbot first appeared in Apple's Chinese App Store in late January, it leapfrogged ChatGPT to claim the #1 spot in less than 48 hours. Driven entirely by word of mouth and screenshots of its eerily human reasoning. Unlike its Western rivals, R1 didn't just spit out an answer. It spelled out its logic chain step by step before responding, almost daring you to poke holes in the argument. The effect was hypnotic. Users reported scrolling through explanations the way others binge TikTok. Every scroll meant more session time, and more session time fed the algorithmic rankings that shoved R1 even higher. Within 72 hours, the model topped the UC Berkeley-affiliated Chatbot Arena leaderboard, muscling past GPT-4 and Claude 3. Benchmarks that once looked unreachable for startups were suddenly falling to a company most analysts had never heard of. And then came the figure that detonated on social media: $6 million, the supposed all-in training cost. In a week where Microsoft, Amazon, and Google were budgeting $250 billion for AI infrastructure, DeepSeek's price tag felt like a rounding error. Every big tech CFO reached for a calculator. Every retail investor reached for the sell button. Yet the real mystery wasn't the ranking or the price. It was the man who orchestrated the coup. At 39, Liang Wenfeng doesn't do press tours. One of the few photos that exist shows him in a plain white shirt, smirking like he knows a secret the rest of the room has missed. Born in rural Guangdong, Liang earned twin degrees in electronic information engineering and computer vision from Zhejiang University, then drifted into quant finance, co-founding the $10 billion hedge fund High Flyer Capital at age 30. High Flyer's edge was pattern spotting at speed, machine-learned trading systems that sniffed statistical anomalies before humans could blink. But Liang grew restless. In 2023, he carved DeepSeek out of the hedge fund, hired just 100 elite graduates, each offered Silicon Valley-level equity, and told them to build an LLM that earned its keep, not one that burned venture money. His obsession was efficiency. Whereas OpenAI's flagship run allegedly consumed approximately 25,000 H100 GPUs, Liang's engineers tested every optimizer, sparsity trick, and parameter-efficient fine-tuning method in the literature, then wrote new ones. He stockpiled older Nvidia H800 cards before U.S. export controls kicked in, betting that clever code could outclass brute force silicon. The wager would upend billion-dollar capex plans across the West. Social feeds lit up. OpenAI spent billions. DeepSeek spent $6 million. Game over. Reality, of course, was murkier. Semiconductor analysts quickly noted that 2,048 H800 GPUs alone cost about $5 to $6 million at market rates, meaning the famous figure likely referred to the final training sprint, not the cumulative R&D. Yet even skeptics admitted something spectacular had happened. DeepSeek ran a mixture of experts, MOE architecture, that activates only the slices of the network needed for a given prompt, slashing compute by up to 90%. Combine that with ruthless data deduplication and custom CUDA kernels, and the cost per token plunges. Suddenly the AI arms race looked less like a spending contest and more like a chess match of algorithmic elegance versus raw horsepower. That shift had a chilling effect on Wall Street's favorite narrative. AI will guzzle infinite chips and electricity, therefore buy Nvidia. If a startup could squeeze GPT-4 class performance out of year-old silicon, the entire demand curve for data center GPUs had to be redrawn. Investors hit sell almost reflexively, erasing nearly 17% from Nvidia in one session. Reuters. And the dominoes kept falling. Nvidia's collapse rippled outward. AMD, Marvell, Supermicro, any ticker with AI baked into its valuation, dragged the NASDAQ 100 and P500 into the red. Energy stocks slumped as well. The street suddenly doubted whether hyperscalers would need as many new gigawatts to feed gargantuan data farms. Even cloud titans felt the sting. Microsoft alone had earmarked $50 billion for AI capex in 2025. Amazon and Google weren't far behind. Now boardrooms buzzed with the same uncomfortable question. Are we about to overspend on a technology that someone just made 10 times cheaper? Meanwhile, equipment vendors, from power distribution units to industrial cooling, watched their order backlogs thin. A single efficiency breakthrough in Shenzhen had frozen multi-billion-dollar budgets in Seattle, Austin, and Santa Clara. The irony? DeepSeek's own offices still ran on second-hand desks. But efficiency came with a price, one measured not in dollars, but in words that users were suddenly forbidden to type. Ask DeepSeek about Tiananmen Square, and R1 politely changes the subject. The model's knowledge weights are aligned with Beijing's censorship rules, meaning politically sensitive prompts get the AI equivalent of a shrug. Western users recoiled, but Liang insisted, "We obey local law." Enter Perplexity AI, a U.S. search startup that forked R1's open-source weights, stripped the filters, and released R1-1776, so named for America's revolutionary ethos. Overnight, coders everywhere experimented with an uncensored Chinese-engineered brain that spoke flawless English. Perplexity AI. Gambit underscored the tension at the heart of open-source AI. Transparency accelerates science, but it also exports geopolitics. Washington hawks blasted the move as digital fentanyl, while free software advocates hailed it as a win for research reproducibility. The code was out, the genie loose. No amount of export control could stuff it back. And that genie was already inspiring new challengers on both sides of the Pacific. Weeks after the R1 drama, Huawei unveiled its cloud matrix 384-384, Ascend 910C processors wired into a single supernode. Huawei bragged it out, gunned Nvidia's top-end NVL72 cluster by 67% in raw compute and carried triple the memory, albeit at higher power draw. Not to be outdone, Alibaba announced Qwen 3, a family of hybrid reasoning models trained on cross-modal data, from Mandarin legal docs to English math proofs, claiming higher accuracy per watt than anything yet measured. Across the Pacific, U.S. legislators responded by tightening export licenses for advanced AI chips, projecting an $11 to $12 billion revenue hit across Nvidia and AMD. ReutersCSS.org. And then came a Reuters leak. Microsoft had opened an internal probe into whether a DeepSeek-linked group siphoned proprietary OpenAI data to bootstrap R1. DeepSeek denied wrongdoing. Redmond lawyers kept digging. Regardless of the probe's outcome, one fact was undeniable. The monopoly many assumed Silicon Valley held over state-of-the-art AI was gone, splintered by a scrappy outfit that worshipped frugality over flash. But where does the shrapnel land next? DeepSeek exposed an inconvenient truth. Compute scaling laws bend when ingenuity applies pressure. If MoE routing, sparse activation, and quantization can knock 90% off training budgets, then the future of AI supremacy might hinge less on who owns the biggest server farm and more on who writes the cleverest optimizer. That lesson resonates far beyond language models. Imagine drug discovery pipelines or climate simulation grids suddenly affordable to mid-size labs. Imagine edge devices running GPT-4 level cognition on a smartphone chip. The addressable market balloons, but the profit margins of today's data center oligarchs could shrink. Investors are already recalibrating. In February, a basket of AI infrastructure stocks underperformed the Russell 1000 by 600 basis points, while boutique optimizer startups tripled their Series A valuations. Analysts who once filled spreadsheets with CapEx forecasts now model compute elasticity curves, asking how performance per dollar shifts when new algorithms drop. Still, even efficiency revolutions need trust, and that's the one resource DeepSeek hasn't fully secured. DeepSeek's code is open, but its data provenance remains opaque. Where did the terabytes of training text originate? How much aligns with state-sponsored narratives? Microsoft's investigation is one thread. Another is the academic community's call for model card audits that verify bias, safety, and licensing compliance. Liang has been coy, promising a full technical report later this year. Yet history suggests openness often clashes with national security caution, especially when cutting-edge AI emerges from countries under U.S. export scrutiny. Whether DeepSeek opts for radical transparency or strategic silence will shape its global adoption curve. Meanwhile, Silicon Valley is scrambling to retake the narrative. OpenAI hints at GPT-5 sampling like humans, Anthropic teases a Claude that debates moral philosophy, and Google touts Gemini Ultralight running 5 trillion tokens deep. But the days when bigger automatically meant better and better automatically meant more expensive are over. DeepSeek broke that mental model. Which brings us to the only question that matters. For a decade, the AI playbook was simple: raise billions, hoard GPUs, burn electricity, and pray your loss-leading model captured the market before the money ran out. DeepSeek tore that playbook in half. With ruthless efficiency, 100 engineers forced the world's richest companies to rethink spending plans measured in trillions. If a startup with thrift shop hardware can match giants' flagship models, two realities collide. Talent and algorithms, not capital and concrete, decide the frontier. Moats built on scarcity evaporate the moment scarcity itself is engineered away. Investors will keep hunting the next DeepSeek. Regulators will keep tightening the chip vise. Engineers will keep prying more performance from less silicon. And every time someone whispers $6 million, another boardroom will remember January 27, 2025, the day one quiet Chinese coder turned quant sent a $593 billion shockwave through the stock market and proved that, in AI, clever beats Colossal. Where the next quake strikes is anyone's guess. But one thing is clear: the era of spending your way to supremacy is gone. The age of thinking your way there has just begun.